Hello and welcome to OzByDrone. I'm Greg.
Hi everybody, I'm John. Welcome to the show. Looking forward to spending the next hour with you, having some great fun all about drones.
Absolutely. Welcome to our show, to our regulars. We've got a great show today. We've got some great news coming up. We've got a guest that's got a lot to talk about later. We've got lots of interesting stuff coming up there. Our news today, we're going to have a look at some LiDAR stuff. We're going to have a look at Skydio in Australia. We're going to have a look at licensing to haul cargo in an airport. All sorts of really good stuff. So do stick with us today. But before we do anything else, John, what's happening in your world this week?
Oh, well, start off, I had a fly this morning. That was great. I love to start my day getting out and flying. So I got the old Phantom 4 Pro out with the PPK stuff and had a bit of fun at home. And I reckon it's a great way to start any day. We've also recently looking at a nice contract with a government agency to talk about fire stuff. So that's going to be really good to look at that, how we can help them do more observational work with fire. Lots happening in that space as well.
Okay. So you mentioned PPK stuff at home while flying the Phantom today. Was there a reason why you were doing that?
Yeah, dust off. We actually decided across all the airplanes we've got to do 6 monthly periodic inspections. So you've still got your pre-flight, post-flight and all that sort of stuff, 50 hourlies and everything. But we thought, right across the board, every 6 months we really have not a tear down, but a really close look over the aircraft and then sign them off. So it was that aircraft's turn. I hadn't flown it for about 2.5 months. I hadn't done any work, actually longer than that. So, one of the things you've got to do is get it out at home and dust off the feathers before you take it out and do any work with it. Make good sense, of course. But so I always think that's a fun excuse, to go for a fly and check everything works.
Sounds like a lot of fun. Let's get into the news of the week, though, before we do anything else. And as always, OzByDrone News is brought to you by AirData UAV. Is your drone healthy or is it about to surprise you on your next flight? Don't wait to find out. Discover under the hood information and review the early signs of problems before you take off again. Use the discount code OzByDrone20 and you will get a 20% discount. There is a link in the description. Now, our first story today, we're going to have a look at some LiDAR stuff. SPH Engineering has updated its UGCS software with their LiDAR toolset for UAVs. The toolset is designed to unlock the full potential of LiDAR sensors. So have you done any LiDAR work yourself yet, John?
No, I've worked alongside some. We haven't done a lot, actually. Mostly the work that we've done is photogrammetry. And that was probably, we got headed in that direction because LiDAR data sets are quite dense. So you need to have some pretty powerful software. And also at the end user, they're sometimes specific with what they need. It's very, very good. I mean, we're getting to the stage now where LiDAR is a very, very usable and applicable tool. And because over this time, you can see a 300 there picking up the box. I mean, they're not lightweight usually. Most of them around 1 kilo or so forth. But that's quite remarkable for what they are. And the other thing, of course, is live LiDAR feeds require a fair bit of bandwidth if you're going to do live LiDAR. So no is the short answer, no, but I'm interested in it for sure.
Yeah, one thing I've said before, I would love to see some of the drone manufacturers getting on board with a unified cloud storage product for drone, something that's going to say everything that we're going to have, you can decide which bits of your flight you want to upload and if it's going to be live or delayed when you land. And yep. Once you've done that, have the different cloud software product providers able to do something on the back end.
Yeah, that's true. Well, look, I think the thing they struggle with is that LiDAR has a lot more, I suppose, usable space than than photogrammetry. You can do a lot more with LiDAR in terms of penetrating foliage and getting digital surface models that will penetrate the tree cover. And you sometimes, in terms of LiDAR inspections as well, it might be just spot LiDAR rather than the area type LiDAR that you're seeing there. But I agree. I think you should watch that space, because the more and more these platforms and data gets used, the more of those third-party cloud-based applications and service providers you're going to see. They're certainly there at the moment, and they're expanding, and it's a big business in the drone industry for sure.
Yeah. I think there's room definitely for that kind of middleware layer, the cloud data abstraction layer. I think that's a
absolutely
place to look. Let's move on from that and look at something a little bit Australian. Skydio is expanding. One of the leading manufacturers, Skydio, has this week announced that they're bringing their products to Australia and New Zealand. ANZ customers can now access the autonomous drone, the Skydio 2, along with Skydio Autonomy Enterprise Foundation, 3D Scan and Cloud for enterprise and public sector customers. Skydio has also announced the Skydio X2, which is designed for business applications, is now available for pre-orders and will start shipping in Q3. So, John, do you think Skydio is going to be part of your tool set?
Yeah, look, I'm confused by it, if I've got to say, because, you look at DJI's idea, they talk about consumer drones and they talk about prosumer drones, and then they've got their professional or enterprise. They use the word enterprise. And it's quite clear the lines. A Matrice 300 is not something that you buy just for tooling around the house and taking photos of pretty pictures. It's an actual working aircraft. And I mean, Skydio have taken the idea that they're going to have a platform that really, you can chase yourself on your mountain bike running through the bushes, which is definitely a consumer-based idea, to high-end enterprise stuff. So I'm interested. It seems to me to be a different, way that they're going to try and move into the market. There's some benefits to it for sure, and I think from what I've read and understand, it's a pretty good aircraft. There's no doubt about that. So I'm really keen to see it get launched here, and if it does the job, there's it won't stop us using it. We'll be using it for sure.
Yeah, I think there is an intent though in the way that they're positioning their products, that they are trying to decouple the service from the hardware. So if you have a look at them, they're talking about their 3D scan and cloud and all of that and so on. That's a software layer that sits on top of the data, which sits on top of whatever the drone may be underneath that's part of their fleet.
Yeah, true. There's some similarities there. I mean, a Matrice and a Mavic Mini have both just got 4 props on them and they fly. They certainly lift different things, but yeah, the cloud end and the processing end is where you sort of start to as you say, decouple what they're used for. So yeah, I'm real keen to look at it. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you've got the lifting capacity and the payload capacity, which will give you different features of data that goes into the cloud. But then the unified processing on the back, and just reading from ZMeet there, Skydio has 3D imaging. Yes, that's part of their product, where they can, in their cloud, build that 3D imaging and point cloud and all of that kind of stuff.
I'm still trying to get around the idea that I've got a LiDAR unit on my phone, my new phone, and how that, it's obviously a very basic low power LiDAR, but it's not unreasonable to think that some of these smaller platforms are going to have even that kind of technology, not just in their obstacle avoidance, but perhaps further in terms of gathering data.
Yeah, I think the time will come. I think the
you
time
go
will
to sleep,
definitely
Lloyd?
come.
I'm watching you. I'm just checking on Lloyd there. He's in the background. He's still smiling. Okay, that's good.
Okay.
There he is. Hi, Lloyd.
And it's our friend, Lloyd, the grumpy vlogger.
Hello, everyone.
We always got to do that. We mention even to our guests that we keep an eye on Lloyd in the background. So when we start talking about LiDAR and cloud platforms, I just see his eyes glaze over first. They glaze over, and then all of a sudden off he goes. And so that's the cue to move on.
Can you just put Lloyd full screen again? Press that button one more time.
Oh, there he goes.
Yeah. That's when we know we've talked too long on a topic. So let's move on to our next one. We're going to go on to cargo. And in particular, Drone Delivery Canada is the name of a company that's been seeking a license for commercial operations. The Edmonton drone operator has received permission to haul cargo under a conditional license for 1 year. And this was handed to them, and they're going to do work at Edmonton International Airport. In addition, Indro Robotics received the first license last October 26. Both companies are limited to short-haul cargo flights. I guess my kind of question for you, John, how do you feel about a drone operator doing a cargo haul at an airport?
Airports are great. So one of the things we always know that we've got to keep our distance from airports. Guess what? The safest place to fly and the lowest risk for manned aircraft when you're flying is at an airport if you're being controlled. You're basically under a system which is, works quite well, is in place, and you'd have a clearance to cross the runway and fly around the airport, do a runway inspection, whatever it is, and land, and you're going to be separated positively from those manned aircraft. So in a way, you've got an airport environment is actually the safest place to fly. There is none better. You've got a tower looking at you, you've got radar, you've got everything in place to actually do it. So when you've got an approval or clearance to actually fly there, you not only do you know that you're not endangering a manned aircraft, but you know nothing's going to hit you as well. And so it's complex, but as I said, I feel quite comfortable about that. There wouldn't be any problem at all.
Okay. Look, do you think that we're a long way away from anything like that being real in Australia, since we're an Australian channel?
No, I don't. And really, it's again, part of our guest and topic today in advocacy, one of the things that the companies are really kind of looking for it. I mean, we had a German company doing pre-flight inspections on the larger aircraft like the A380, being able to fly up and inspect the rudder. So one of the things that have come in recently that I mentioned last week, we've got these 3 new types of flying: shielded, enclosed, and the other one. And enclosed means you're flying inside a hangar. So flying inside a maintenance hangar at an airport is a very valuable thing to do. So there's going to be more and more of that starting in Australia for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds interesting. I'll look forward to seeing that happening. And I'm still looking forward to our guest about some of the legal topics. We'll get there. We've got a couple more stories first. Our next one over here, one important application of drones is to assist in emergency situations. One example was Mexico in 2017. All the scenes of this earthquake were captured by different, just a Queenstown storm. We've got this drone footage of Queenstown, which was something that came across our news desk recently. It's not as big as the earthquake, but again, going and taking pictures and understanding the impact of weather events or other natural events, something that's a really good use for drones. You did some stuff some time back, John.
Yeah, did we actually deployed Cyclone Debbie a couple of years ago, and it was a great gig. Myself and another chap went up to the cyclone area. We just sat south of the cyclone when it went through. We were able to roll in. We had a little Cessna 172 because there was no airlines going there. We were able to get it into an unprepared strip, set up and do some photogrammetry of the damage there. And it was basically for an insurance company. They often say, when you see news stories about a cyclone, you always see the worst stuff. They don't really know the extent of the damage. And so what they really want is that data to know just what their liability is going to be. And so I think, for everybody watching this show, this stuff is a no-brainer. We all know that drones are going to be incredibly good at life-saving in all sorts of manners, whether it's in the water, whether it's in earthquakes, whatever the floods, which we've seen a lot of, all of that stuff. There's something that even a helicopter can't really do, oftentimes in danger. And also helicopters are lifting people out of those situations. But for recon, as I said, for all of us on the show, this sits in the no-brainer basket. It really does.
Yeah, absolutely. A quick little sideline for a minute. Mr. Wayne King, hi Greg, John, and Lloyd. Had a good day flying yesterday. I'm glad you did. I'd love to see where you flew. Please do send that in. And just a reminder, forward scheduling the end of August, the last weekend in August or the last Friday in August for you guys in America. We're going to do that global fly-in thing as a simulcast. And that's going to be actually, instead of doing OzByDrone simulcast to a few other channels, we're going to take Ready, Set, Drone. He's going to be in the pilot seat running his show. You will bring your video into our studio and we'll send it off to him, and it'll all come together and look absolutely wonderful, and we're going to have a lot of fun. So we get at this point, and let me press this button. Have a look at our last story here today before we get into our guest. The NTSB wants the authority to investigate drone accidents. A new notice of proposed rulemaking, NPRM, from the National Transportation Safety Board, or the NTSB, seeks to revise the agency's authority to investigate drone accidents. Currently, the NTSB is only authorised to investigate drone accidents based on a weight criteria of 300 pounds. The NPRM would remove that weight requirement entirely, allowing it to investigate incidents for any aircraft that has an airworthiness certificate, or if an airworthiness approval requirement is part of that particular aircraft. John, Australia.
Yeah, look, they're looking at that too. We've just seen our safety board say, well, look, we haven't got the resources. I think that's really where it comes down to. We haven't got the resources to look at everything that happens. I'm not totally on board with that. I think, we used to report bird strikes and any kind of prop failure or anything at all that happened, we would report, mostly because we wanted to build confidence. I know it's a strange way of doing it, but if they actually had everybody reporting in, there was a central way of saying, look, we haven't had any motor failures in this many thousands of hours. You can build confidence around the platform that you're flying. So it's a two-edged sword. I understand their resources. Our safety board here looks after, I think the NTSB is the same, both land accidents, rail accidents, marine accidents, and air accidents. So those inspectors often call on experts, and I don't know that they've got a lot in the RPAS or drone space, but I do know our safety board here has their own REOC license, which is like a 117, and they're using drones extensively in other types of accident situations like train accidents and marine stuff and everything. So they're using them quite extensively. But
so let me just get this right, though. Let me just get this right. So we've got the US NTSB saying they want to investigate more things, and we've got Australians saying they want to investigate less.
This is it. This is the thing. And I think, again, it comes down to that word resourcing. And they just, you just log on and it gets logged into a database. I don't see the problem with that in terms of managing the data. So if you did, a bird strike's a simple one, and they do happen. And if we were able to just put the location, maybe you could identify the type of bird. Eventually, one day in future situations, you can take that data and say, look, when at this time of the year in Australia, it's September, when the magpies get aggressive during their breeding season. So you can actually mitigate against that risk if you know there's enough data there and actionable data for you to mitigate risks around it. So I don't know. Again, it's a two-edged sword based on resourcing. I think there is technological solutions to it that can help us, and that maybe that's a resourcing problem too. Who knows? And cost recovery, because they have to recover their cost in this country, and that's a difficult one as well. I don't want to start having people pay to submit a report. That will kill it.
Yeah. Look, just thinking about how this is myself, right? So the people in America want to investigate more. The people in Australia are not saying they want to investigate less. They're just saying that maybe if we differentiate between reporting versus investigation. So anything where there's no injury to life or property, something that can be reported and statistics go into their existing database with no further action required. I think that'd be a good solution for Australia. I think they should continue to do what they do right now for drones. And anytime there is something that involves injury to person, injury to property, or evidence of a crime, and this is one that has been in my bonnet for a while, where people are going and shooting guns at drones. We really need to have an Australian body investigating that. That's my opinion.
Well, here's the thing. They're talking here about making 25 kilos a cutoff rate for drones, where anything under that's non-reportable. I mean, I still can't get my head around why they're going that direction. And I think, a 24-kilo drone can do a fair bit of damage. And there's a clear list of what's reportable. And we have two types of reporting on accidents. We have what we call an incident, and we have an accident. And, they're outlined. Pretty much the words describe what they are. An incident can be simply if you turn up to a job and you suspect that your observer's been drinking alcohol, that's a reportable incident. And you don't have to go to necessarily. You have to go to a damp manager in your company and mention that, because it breaks the operating rules normally. But it also needs to be reported with the safety body as well, because interestingly, the NTSB sits separately to the FAA. What this reason is that if the NTSB examines an accident and says, look, that's actually not the fault of the pilot, the operator, or weather or anything else, it's actually because the FAA hasn't enactioned a rule set that would prevent that accident. And so the FAA can be liable under the NTSB's investigations. And so you have to have that separation of power, if you like, because otherwise the FAA is not answerable to anybody. And so that would be, you wouldn't want that in a situation where you're trying to, look at accidents and incidents in an unbiased way.
Yeah. Just a quick sideline topic related to the NTSB, a comment from My PI Dream. Thanks for watching. I don't think the NTSB has enough money resources if they have to keep up with art. Art, you do have a few challenges, but let's move on from that. We're going to go now. That's good. Time to get on to our guest. Let me press that button and then that button there, and we're going to bring in our guest today, Ryan. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
G'day and welcome. Tell me about yourself. Where are you from? What's your drone background? Where did it all begin?
Well, so my name is Ryan Latourette, and I am in Michigan for the United States. I am the Director of Regulatory Affairs for the Great Lakes Drone Company, and deal a lot with the legalities and all the regulations regarding drones in the United States. Particular to Michigan, I do a lot of advocacy here and tried to spread that out to multiple states around the area.
Okay. And what was your first aircraft you first flew?
Yes. So my very first aircraft was the DJI Phantom 1. And I can tell you the funny story is I had been looking around for aerial photography for a family farm that was being sold. I wanted to get a shot of the farm and thought, hey, let's price this out. So I looked at a number of aviation companies, helicopters, Cessnas, etc. And the amount of money that they wanted for a single shot was just astronomical. Suddenly this DJI Phantom 1 is out here and it's only $500. Let's do it. I'll take a shot. I'll turn around and sell the drone. I'm not out at maybe but 500 or maybe $50. Sell it on the used market and away we go.
Okay.
I never did get the shot of the family farm, but I never sold the drone either. So it just got. And
you did get some shots of a few other things. We're having a look at some of your recent footage. This was from a family holiday, was it?
just got back from Iceland. So this is Gullfoss in Iceland. Beautiful place to fly a drone. They are very lenient about their drone regulations, and their scenery is tremendous.
Yeah, I did recall seeing something on your post where I found this one about the wind on the day.
Yeah, so you can see the wind is just jockeying around. I'm flying the Mavic 2 Pro here. In the wind, you can see it kind of floating up and down. I watched a guy fly the original Mavic. He got about 90 seconds in before he broke his gimbal because of the wind. Brought it back down, and he was done. It's just that cautionary tale to somebody that's not familiar with their aircraft and their capabilities and limitations. You want to make sure that you're okay with the weather, and wind is especially one of those things to watch out for.
Absolutely. Now, in a moment, I'm going to play your other clip, but I want John to pay careful attention, and Grumpy and all of our viewers, because there's a kind of a built-in quiz in the clip that we're about to see. You've got to be looking very, very closely. So I'm giving you plenty of time. Watch closely. So we've got 2 clips here, and as it says, one video was legally obtained, but the other video violates park regulations. Now, I'm just going to pause it there. They seem identical. I'm going to pause it deliberately to let our viewers type in the chat. We'll come back to the studio for a moment. We'll come back to John. I'd like to see him in the studio instead of the TV. John.
It's difficult. So flying in national parks, so if I use Australian regulations, where did you take off from would be a limit. If you took off from outside the park grounds on private property, then that would allow you legally to fly. If you took off from their grounds without permission, it would become an illegal flight. It's hard to tell from the vision with a zoom. It's obviously both oblique photography, so you're not, and it looks like you're flying over trees from what you can tell. So all of those other rules, like the 30-meter rule, populous area rule, I can't tell. It doesn't look like excessive height. It's in the daylight. So, if I tick them all off, the only one I can think of is where you take off from.
Okay. Now I've got a couple of comments here. The drone took off from outside the park.
Yeah.
Another one said taking off from the park.
That's right.
We've got someone who said both were legally obtained. The park regulations were illegal. So there's a few viewpoints. Now let's just play that again.
That's a good one to discuss, actually, about parks and the legalities, because if you take off in your Cessna, you can fly over a national park. I don't need any clearance at all. Only marine parks that have sensitive wildlife have restrictions about the altitude. So, but that comes back to the rule about where you took off from. Once you take off from private property, legally, it falls under federal jurisdiction, and the parks don't necessarily, under the Constitution, have a case against you. You can say, I took it with my helicopter, and that might be an interesting variation here. One was shot with a helicopter and one was shot with a drone. How would that play out? And our viewers in this show are hitting the target when they're talking about where you took off from.
Yeah. So now that we've had that, I'd like to hear what is the answer. Let's start with that.
Yeah, so John, you've hit on something that's really the same in the United States with national parks. The national parks here disallow you from flying or take off, launch, land, and operate from within their boundaries. But as long as you're stepping outside their boundaries, any overflight is fine. Now, this particular clip, this is not a national park. Instead, it's a county park. So it's just a local government that has a park. And the clip here is one and the same. They're completely identical. I just put one on top, one on the bottom. The launch point was actually in the park. The difference here is the park has a regulation that says you cannot fly a drone, launch, land, or operate from within our park system. And the challenge here is that Michigan is one of 17 states in the United States that have passed a law of preemption. And that preemption says no local governments can create or enforce their own drone ordinance. So even though the county has said, oh, you can't fly here, the state of Michigan says, well, we're the state, we trump you, and yes, you can fly here. So that is the very same video. It's just duplicated, and so it's completely identical.
Yeah. Well, this goes back. Interesting. Not sure about US law, but I'm sure you can enlighten me. What happened in Australian constitutional law was it comes back to landowner. Do you own the land? And originally, a long time ago, you used to own it to the depths of hell and all the skies above. And of course, then when aircraft started coming in, they said, well, you don't own the navigable airspace above your property. So non-navigable airspace, and I'm sure you've seen the same sort of thing, a landowner has a right to enjoy their property, and so any kind of nuisance or overflight could create a case. But provided you're not creating that nuisance of repetitive flying and so forth, they had to change it. And here in Australia, it's Section 9 of the Constitution, and it's called the Freedom of Air Navigation Act. In 1938, it came into being, where airplanes could, under federal, could fly in navigable airspace like a crown land. Is it similar there, where the states just can't do it? You're going to fly. If I fly from one point in the US to another and land at those two separate places, I can fly over that park at any, at a height that's navigable, and airplanes do it all the time. They don't even talk to Michigan. Michigan doesn't have anything to do with airplanes that fly over them.
Do you know what, John? Do you know what, John? We were talking a little bit before, and you mentioned about CASA going to different people potentially, and saying, "Hey, well, if you can't fly a drone here, you can't have any aircraft going over you."
Well, this is what's what's
you know what I would
there.
love. You know what I would love theoretically. If CASA and the equivalent, the FAA, said, no problem, if you want no aircraft flying over your land, no problem. You can rent it from us since we own it, and you've got to pay the license fees to have no aircraft in your particular land. That'd work.
Never happened. Michigan doesn't want aircraft. They don't want to have their Boeings restricted and their airspace restricted. You come to someone and say, well, I don't want a drone flying in the sky above me. But of course, and this is where the law is interesting, that a drone is just an aircraft in the same two countries. But I'm interested in what Ryan's got to say about this advocacy and a step towards guiding local jurisdictions, state governments and local governments. The federal government needs to come in and say to these people and be very clear about it. This is what the law is, and you can't change it at the moment because it's constitutional law that you're dealing with, and that many people don't understand the complexities with amending the Constitution to change the property rights, because that's what it comes down to. Remember, property is not just a house or land. Property extends to other definitions as well in terms of ownership of property.
Yeah.
What do you say, Ryan?
Yeah. So, John, you're exactly on the challenge that's happening. So, in the United States, back in the 1940s, we had a challenge by a chicken farmer, Cosby versus the U.S.
That's
and
right.
That chicken farmer was having bombers from World War II bombers fly over his property at a height of as low as 83 feet. And it was constant, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. These bombers are going over. His chickens are dying, right, because of the disruption of sound. He can't sleep. His wife can't sleep. And of course, he says, hey, wait a minute, this has got to end. So what happens is he finds a nice lawyer who figures out, hey, we are going to take the United States to court on a takings clause of the Constitution. And the takings clause is saying, hey, if you're going to use this property, you need to pay for this property. You need to go out and use eminent domain to obtain the property from the property owner. So the judges ruled, the Supreme Court ruled, yes, they took the precedent that anything above in the airspace was now able to be used by an aircraft. What they didn't do is delineate a height as to where that was, that a property owner would still own up to some level of enjoyment above their property. But modern day time says, hey, we still have a chance for aircraft to go over. Now, we took that a little one step further in terms of drones, and we had a number of local municipalities that were trying to create their own patchwork of regulations. And the states were looking at that and saying, hey, wait a minute, the FAA doesn't want this. If they don't want this and we don't want this, we need some way to get rid of it. And so what they did is they passed their own preemption clause to say, localities, everything you do, you have to answer to us. So as a state, we are telling you, you cannot create or enforce your own regulations. And then the state is repointing back to the federal government to say, follow the federal regulations. And so it makes a nice system that is, really a tight-knit piece between the federal government and the states. But right now we only have 17 states that have passed that. So in the other 33 states, you still have local municipalities that can stand up their own regulations. And that makes it a real challenge for drone operators to know, hey, I'm in, this particular podunk town and I can't fly, but I go to the next town over and I can. And that's a real challenge to understand where you're going to be legal or not. And
that's right.
So that is our chance at this point to go into advocacy and change that.
So Ryan, what I see though is even if they sort this out, and if it's not an airspace issue, I see lawmakers and other parties saying, well, we can't win that rule. Let's try and win the privacy law rule. Let's try and limit drones and restrict their movement by saying, well, this is a breach of privacy. Now, that's a whole completely separate set of legislation and certainly not mature enough to handle what drones are. I mean, how are you going to do that if everyone's got a phone on their mobile camera? And so if you're flying in a public space and you're in a public space, just like you can take a photo with your phone, you can take a photo with your drone. It's also a multispectral drone is not even taking photos. But I see a lot of that creeping in legal work now where they think, okay, let's go the privacy route and see if we can win that. Because guess what? In a privacy argument, we've got the voters on our side. Now that's a different, whether they might not even understand the air legislation, they certainly understand the word privacy. You put that word up in front of anybody and they'll give you an opinion on it straight away.
Yep, and that's exactly what we've had happen this month. In fact, we have a county here in Michigan who's decided to take on the idea of privacy in drones, and so they passed an ordinance. I was just at that meeting on Tuesday. They passed an ordinance that says you cannot launch a drone within, I think it's 50 feet or 500 feet of the county building because of privacy. You can't record anything without consent. You can't take photographs without consent. And it purely is going on the privacy aspects, places a $500 fine on the drone operator for that. And expands it to things like the county jail, the courthouses, and it's all geared towards privacy. It's breach of security, looking at employees coming and going from the lands. And what we've said is two things. One, obviously, we've looked at the preemption clause and said you can't do this. The state of Michigan has dictated that you are not able to create such an ordinance or enforce such an ordinance. But then we also look at our First Amendment, because we have 10 amendments, the first 10 amendments in the Bill of Rights for the Constitution. The number one amendment was freedom of speech. And in freedom of speech, it goes into things of photography. And so we've already had court rulings at the Supreme Court level that said there can be no expectation of privacy from a public place. Well, the airspace is a public place. So
that's right.
Right there, you're thrown out. And
that's right.
We are in suit with the county at this point. We filed suit. We intend to see that through to a hearing in September.
So let's delineate. Sorry, Greg.
Can I just jump in? I'm just wondering, do you think if you separate the two issues, so we've got privacy as one issue, and the second issue, where can a drone be? Could we have the FAA or a federal law made? We've got the no preemption rule. Okay, so that's fine, but that's only at a state level. That law needs to be implemented at a federal level, number one. And number two, to delineate private property versus navigable airspace, a particular height ceiling, or is it above anything that's unshielded airspace? So you're above the nearest building or something like that.
I think it's complicated, Greg, because when you look at privacy in terms of, Ryan was speaking about prisons, government buildings, military installations, perhaps, all of those things, you're not going to get a huge argument about restricting sensitive material being distributed. Remember, you can take a photo, but if you don't distribute it, there are certain rules about that too. Publishing a photo or disseminating a photo has different rules around again.
I get what you're saying, but where I'm going is if you've got the two issues at the same time, you're never going to make progress. So
they're never going to. But I want them to be separated. I think
correct.
Because I think that if the legislation around evolved airspace gets involved in privacy, I can take off in a 747 and take photos out the window with my camera. So that's what we've got here is then private property. Look at Google Earth. How does Google Earth get away with what they do? That is disseminated information. Everything I've ever photographed with my drone is on Google Earth. And now you bring that into the argument. It's difficult. I think there's one of the dangerous lines here is that, whereas I would agree, we work in prisons in our business, recreational drones flying over prisons, you put a temporary restricted area around it, and that's done deal. And that's an airspace mitigation, because drones not only take photos of it, but they drop things and so forth. So TRAs are a simple way. A temporary restricted area is a simple airspace management system for removing an aircraft of any kind, a helicopter or a drone, from a sensitive installation. Where does the line go, though, between private property, the private citizen, and what in the Constitution designates a citizen's right to privacy inside the Constitution, if there is one?
Yeah, so when we talk about the Constitution and privacy, it gets dicey. There's really no expectation of privacy in the Constitution unless we get into the Fourth Amendment. And the Fourth Amendment is really on search and seizure. So it's preventing you as a citizen from the government coming in and saying, oh, well, we're going to come in and seize this, or we're going to take a look at your property and, oh, yeah, this is a problem. We're going to grab this from you. So there's a notion in the United States that we're all entitled to some type of privacy, but it's not really backed entirely by the constitutional law. And that's a challenge. I think where you're hitting on is the piece that we're in trouble with. When we look at that delineation, what's navigable airspace, what's not, where's that line? Right now we have a couple of cases. Riley versus Florida is one where it got down to 400 feet, where a police helicopter was looking over a marijuana field and said, hey, we can spot this with our naked eye. And the Supreme Court allowed that. So we now push that navigable airspace down to 400. The next one was Breza versus US. It gets pushed down to 200. And again, it's with weed growing, right?
Yeah.
The third one we have is Giancola versus West Virginia. And in this one, the helicopter was actually at tree height. So the rotors were basically battering at the tops of the trees. So we're somewhere around 100 feet. But what we don't have is that to say, hey, it's 100 feet. I don't know that we'll ever get there. Because you still have things like skyscrapers. You still have the ability to build something that's much taller than the treetops.
Yeah, sure.
So, we will have a number of court cases that go through, and we'll probably have case law that comes out of that to give us a height. But what we want is some type of advocacy to go to Congress, to go to the president, to go to each individual state and say, hey, let's find a level that makes sense. Now, I'm of the advocacy point of view that that's got to happen at a federal level. Once the federal takes that and puts that in place, then we have preemption at the state level, and the states preempt the localities from making their own. So we can roll everything up to the federal level. And for a drone pilot, that makes sense. Now I can go to Colorado, I can go to New York, and it doesn't matter. I know what my limitations are.
Yeah, I think that's sensible because it maintains what aviation's had. Ryan, there's a lot of talk now about the future UTMs, or Universal Traffic Management Systems, where you would look at various technological solutions for managing low-level airspace. Now, I think the aviation world is very happy if these are kind of clearly delineated so that low-level airspace has its own set of rules, if you like, and restricted places you can't fly. Once you're above into navigable airspace higher, because remember, drones at the moment are I'm not telling you this, but I'm reminding our viewers, drones operate legally in what we call non-navigable airspace. So whereas an aeroplane is restricted, conventionally piloted aircraft is restricted from descending below 500 feet under normal circumstances, except takeoff or landing or stress or weather. Don't go to sleep, Lloyd. Listen to this. And so the 100-foot buffer, that's why we've got this 400-foot. People say, where does 400 foot come from? It's to create that 100-foot buffer between navigable and non-navigable airspace. And traditionally, we've always considered 500 feet the lower level for conventionally piloted aircraft as being navigable. And so is there a solution in a future UTM to solve this that would cover, as I said, you can't fly over this prison in low-level airspace. You know, high-level airspace you can, low-level you can't. Is that a solution?
I'm reluctant to say it is. And my reasoning here is, you know, we talk about the 500 foot. That's really not the case in the United States. If you're flying a Cessna, you could fly a Cessna at under 500 feet so long as you are over a sparsely populated area.
Right.
In fact, if you're over a lake, let's say, you could fly that and skim the lake if you wanted. We have crop dusters. Helicopters have no minimum altitude requirements at all. So we're always dealing with low-level aircraft. I think the challenge of the UTM systems is that we add another piece to that in terms of priority. So right now, if I'm flying a drone, I need to give space and see and avoid any manned aircraft. That's great and fine and dandy, but what if my drone is delivering a heart as an organ transplant? Now, does my drone take some type of priority over that helicopter that's in the same space that's out on a tourist visit? So that's the kind of concept that I think the UTM is looking at to say, can we give priority to different vehicles in that same lower airspace, and how do we manage that? And I'm confident that NASA has the best scientists working on this solution, but I'm not confident we're there yet.
You know, I think it's going to happen in terms of the life-saving part of this, Ryan, because the scenario you gave then about delivering a heart, you know, I can see in a few short years where drones are going to have priority. They're doing work evolved around an accident scene, that where manned aircraft are going to have to remain clear of the drone doing its work, and so I think, you know, we can see. So how do you get from one to the other? This is and have a regulatory pathway that looks at the future enough to say, you know, we don't want to stifle this technology. We don't want to put a lid on it because it's actually going to be the one that we depend on one day. And so I'm wondering where our regulators have got that foresight.
So I'm just having a look.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm just having a look at some of the things on our chat. Let's have a look what people are saying there. Remote ID might take care of this, as a comment from Zebmeet. So I don't know if by itself it will, but together with some other details.
It's
people on paramotors. It's a starting point. People on paramotors can be low level. TFRs, helicopters can legally fly wherever they can set down given failure. Comment earlier about some European countries have banned Google Earth, relating to our earlier topics about privacy. Comment from Greg Herman. Ryan laid it all out in a very understandable way. So why do politicians want to complicate the heck out of it?
That's
Answer,
what they do.
Because they can.
That's what they do. They do. Yeah, there's layers of this legislation, Greg, that's complicated. You know, we looked at the surveillance laws, so even aeroscope tracking and tracking aircraft and what the laws are around surveilling someone's position was going to be another layer of legislation that, you know, it was to look at. So I really hope, and I agree with Ryan wholeheartedly, this has to be done federally, and there's too much at stake to get local government and state governments involved. And they don't really have, I don't want to put them down on what they think they should be able to do. I think there's rights involved, but there's a dark path there where if you had a what we call a patchwork quilt of legislation across aviation, it's a disaster. It absolutely is a disaster.
And one last comment from the chat. The answer to the earlier question about politicians, Joe Blaylock says, because politicians are high. Anyway, let's move on. Let's move on from that and do something a little bit different for a couple of moments, if I can find the right button.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's time to play Stop the Yank. Ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
There
we go. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. It's that part of the show that our guests hate, but you love. We get to go and embarrass our guest and bring out the grump. It's time to play Stump the Yank.
All right. What I try and do is ask terminology or questions or slang about Australian slang. And I try to give you 3 choices, and you get to pick which one you want. Okay. What is a chook? Is it
a
special bird? A chook.
A chook.
A chook. A chook. Is it a special bird only in Australia? Or is it a beer, one of their favorites? Or is it a chicken?
Well, I was told that all the right answers have to be beer, but actually I'm going to say chicken.
You are right. It is a chicken. All right.
Hang on, we have a chook beer though. We do have a chook flavored beer, don't we?
Yeah, of course we do.
you of course you do. Yeah. Okay. What is a goon? Is it a beer? Is it a special Australian beer, a special Australian bird? Because the first one is beer, the second one is a bird. Because Australia's got all sorts of crazy wildlife. Or
that all want to kill you, I understand.
Yeah, exactly. Or is it a box of wine?
Ooh.
I will go with wine.
Yeah. Well done.
Wow.
You're gonna have to make these harder, I guess.
Yeah, you're hitting on. Okay.
What else have we got?
I'm gonna go with a tried and true. One more. What is Budgie Smugglers? Is that a favorite beer preferred by pirates? Or is it pirates that brought unusual birds like budgies into Australia? Or Budgie Smugglers Speedos?
Oh my. This one I'll play safe and go with beer.
No, they're actually Speedos.
Can I just share
my.
Our former Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, was famous for his budgie smugglers. He used to go swimming regularly and people used to criticise him about his budgie smugglers. Anyway.
That's fantastic.
Yep.
So, look, Ryan, thank you for being...
smugglers are.
Yeah, absolutely. Ryan, thank you for being with us. And let me get myself back on screen. Where are we? There we go.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, look, do stick around. It was fun having a chat with you and hearing the different legal challenges. I think the only winners in this battle are going to be the lawyers, but that's nothing unusual. So they'll be getting lots of money no matter what the outcome is. But do stick around in the background with us as we have a chat about the remaining news stories. Have a chat in the chat room to some of our guests, and thank you very much again for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. That's fantastic.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the guy you want in your corner in the drone industry. You
Absolutely,
know, someone who's going to stand up for us and tell it like it is. So
by the way,
we appreciate it.
Yeah. By the way, I don't know if you'd heard, but Ken Heron was recently appointed onto an FAA advisory board or committee or group or something. So definitely get in touch with him. Are you on any FAA boards yourself?
I am not. No, I've chosen not to be.
You've chosen not to be.
FAA watchdog, if anything.
Okay, I can understand that. So let's move on. Thank you very much again for being with us. We're going to move on to our next news story, which would be this one. In case you have missed it, the Olympic Games have been televised recently with all sorts of events, including athletics. How does athletics have anything to do with drones? We often refer to drones as flying robots. Well, here's a two-legged robot that has learned how to run. And it's amazing to watch. Now, in this first clip, it's not doing anything particularly spectacular. It's just going for a walk around in the office. But let's cut over to the second clip and you'll see something that I think is pretty amazing.
Yeah, look at this.
It's actually going for a 5,000 metre or a 5 kilometre run. So it's set a record in doing this. This is amazing. I want one.
That's amazing. You look at the design because it's like some kind of bird, you know, although apparently we evolved like that. It's walking on its toes essentially, and its foot is actually the bottom section. That's actually its foot, right? If that was going to mimic humans. And of course we've changed a bit because we sit around and watch YouTube.
Actually, that's how I run.
Yeah.
So what do you reckon, OzByDrone fans? And let's go and get together a GoFundMe campaign to go and buy one of these to go and have running around Sydney streets. I reckon that'd be a winner.
Well, you know, look, watch that space, mate. That's what we're going to have.
Yeah.
We'll
leave that one for now. That was a really cool one. And as always, all of our stories, if you want to see more, hear more, or whatever, you can go to the description for this video. We've got a link to where all of those original stories came from. But now we will go to the next one. Oops, I pressed Dump the Yank again. That was my bad. Let's try this button instead. That one. So an OWL, or an Observation Without Limits, is a company that has been manufacturing drone detection radar systems. Ground Aware is their event-based layered approach for perimeter security in which intruders can be detected in real time. Let's check it out. So Aerial Armor is the name of the company that makes both products.
Equipment. I've been flying drones since 2010, and I've really enjoyed seeing the industry grow so quickly over the last few years. As more and more people started flying, I saw a need to manage various drones in sensitive places. We started helping with aerial security in 2015, using a number of devices to provide some basic info on what's in the nearby airspace. With DJI's Aeroscope, we can get more detailed, actionable information on the majority of drones out there. Aeroscope is really helpful because it shows all nearby DJI drones and they're visually represented on a map. With Aeroscope, we can see the serial number in addition to the pilot's location.
Let's just stop the video because I think I've got the wrong one.
Range of the sensor, which
I think I got the wrong one. We all know about Aeroscope, but there was another one that was meant to be about the Observation Without Limits, but commentary from either or both of you, John, or our guest, about the future of drone tracking and control.
Well, I think that's that's a pretty big subject on its own for another show. One of our viewers talked about registration being a solution, and as we said, that's a start. So Aeroscope doesn't have all of the answers for tracking I like the intent of that video was to advise. Look at the other way, a system that advises drone pilots of what's in the airspace around them a little better, something that more than ADSB would provide, but maybe a cloud-based registration. So if there's a balloon event, if there's other types of aerial activity, that when you log on and you go to your map view, there it is in live, good to see. Oh, look, I've got a balloon competition that's 3 miles down the road and they're expecting to be flying over. Why do we always look at the other way of looking at drones when we don't seriously look at what should be available to the pilot electronically and advise drone pilots so that they know what's going on? It's a pet peeve of mine that it doesn't seem to get much traction, but I'd rather know myself if and I can make the choice to fly how I'm going to fly safely around those other obstacles. Manned aircraft, whatever it is, helicopters. Let's develop a system that goes the other way, that tracks everything and provides that information to all airspace users.
And you remember my beef I had a little while ago about Bald Hill, where some people went up and put no drone signs up there. Initially, I thought it was council. It wasn't council. It was a hang gliding club. And they didn't do that with anyone's authority. They just did it by themselves without any third-party approval. So through a discussion with them, we got those removed, and that's the way it should be. Not saying people shouldn't fly safe. If there's hang gliders in the air, you've got to absolutely give them priority as a drone pilot. But, you've got to go and talk to their controllers that are on the ground if you want to go and fly. When I went there one day, that's exactly what I did, and everyone was happy. But it's this whole negative perception that drones are bad. Got to get rid of that.
It's what the sign says. No drone. They put up a no drone flying. The sign should have said, "Caution: this airspace is used by various users." This is a multiple use airspace area. Alerting so that if you're going to fly there, you say, "Well, it could be a hang glider, it could be a parasail, it could be model slope soaring gliders or low flying helicopters." The sign. As you said, Greg, it comes out with negative intent, and it's not the way it should be done. If they were genuinely interested in creating an environment, the right environment, they would have had a different sign, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Let's now, before we go on to, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I'll jump in and I'll say it's a delicate balance, and I'll take an opposite view where we have remote ID that's been just now finalized with the FAA that is basically requiring your drone to broadcast out information about not only the drone, but your position as the operator, where you're launching from, where you're standing. And the concern there is that this information is going to be available to everybody. Doesn't matter. The Karen down the road has a cell phone. They're going to be able to find out where you're at. And my big concern here is not the people that are interested in drones and coming out and, oh, that's a neat drone. Can I see what you're doing? It's going to be that individual with a gun, right, who wants to shoot that drone out of the sky. They have some, anger management issues towards the drone. Yeah. And my bigger concern is they're going to turn it on the operator, and we are going to end up with a fatality because your position as the operator has been broadcast out to any idiot who wants to do something about what they feel is their right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess the answer is somewhere in between, where you can do a broadcast requiring a certificate at the other end, so another drone or another aircraft in the area can see the data. Happy days. But individual end devices, mobile phones and Karens and all of this other stuff, not required.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, that's a no-brainer.
But then comes the next question. Do the hang gliders, are they going to be required to put remote ID devices on their hang gliders?
Well, here's the thing. I think so. I think if you launch a kite, it should have a telemetry device. I'm not talking about a big kite. Model aircraft, everything that flies is going to share airspace, should be able to broadcast to other airspace users. That's all it has to be. Anybody in the airspace that's using it should be able to see another thing in the airspace. Well, look, that's it. So the remote ID should be broadcasting the aircraft's position, not the operator's position. It'd be like saying to ADSB pilots, when you're piloting an airplane, you broadcast aircraft position. Oh, and by the way, we're going to give you the pilot's house location as well, or his mobile phone number. Dream about that happening. There's, and we're talking about the same thing. We're talking about the same thing.
My bad. I was just about to say, how about broadcast the aircraft location in the clear, but the pilot's location encrypted? And even another drone won't know the pilot's location, but that can be stored for an FAA or CASA or whatever investigation later. But the fact that the drone information about where the aircraft is in the sky, or a hang glider or a paraglider or a paramotor, all of those different types of aircraft, they should all be broadcasting for safety reasons.
Location. Greg, I'd love one day for us to talk to our sponsor, AirData UAV, about this, because they have, through their API, they have an enormous amount of potential for certain information to be available. And so whether they've ever thought about a portal that would just show the drone's location, and it logs the weather as well. You could have that information go to a weather database. There's certainly, the future is going to look a little bit different, but I think that's where our sponsor, has some potential. Maybe they steer clearly away from that. I'd love to talk to them one day about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on. We've got 3 stories left, and we're going to have a little bit of fun with these ones. The next one is titled Bad Drivers. Now, for this one, police use any technology legally and financially available to them. Drivers have to be aware of fixed and mobile cameras, average speed cameras, marked and undercover cars, helicopters, and sometimes even police aircraft. Sorry, I wasn't watching, I was reading. Officer Nightstick. Drivers in Poland can add police drones to the already lengthy list of things that they use. This video shows Polish police looking at various cars and motorbikes being filmed crossing a solid white line to overtake slower vehicles, blissfully unaware that their misdemeanors are being tracked from the sky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, the dummy's still on the screen.
Look,
Bite me, John.
Yeah, that video was way cool, though. You're just seeing them going down the road and every single one of them being pulled into the side road.
Yeah. I got a joke for you, Greg. Seeing we're running out of time. And because the Olympics are on at the moment, as you all know, and it's my favourite Olympic joke. You may have heard it before. So 2 athletes are walking across the quadrangle there, and one says to the other, "Are you a pole vaulter?" And the other one says, "No, I'm actually Austrian, but how did you know my name?"
Okay.
Come on, Lloyd. Lloyd's laughing. I mean, I never get a laugh out of him. You like that one,
Yeah,
Lloyd?
I know, right? That was good. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, mate.
Let's move into our next story, and Officer Nightstick might be around for this one as well. This one is called Red-Faced Rookie. The popularity of drones has led to them being blamed as the source of many UFO sightings, but one recent sighting has law enforcement confused. According to the Daily Record, a cop from Glasgow was chasing what he thought was a drone in the sky. While on her way to the shopping centre, after leaving her station on Tuesday, the officer saw a bright light in the sky, and she thought it was a drone. By the way, to my producer, can we have a couple of cuts to the puppet here and there?
Officer Nightstick.
Yeah. The officer called in the General Complaints Line for Police Scotland to report the incident. She returned to her station to talk to a senior officer and pointed to the white dot in the sky that was following her. The senior officer looked up and realised that she was pointing to, wait for it, Jupiter.
There you go.
Facepalm. Jupiter was visible in the sky, and the rookie cop definitely needs to learn the difference between a drone and a planet.
Hey, you know, well, Venus has been very bright in the sky here for a while. Have you noticed that, Greg? It's absolutely hammering at the moment, mostly because the atmosphere is so clear during the COVID times we're having. But yeah, look, here we go again. Just another assumption that if the UFO's in the sky, you know, it's going to be something evil. And that's what we're flying UFOs anyway. So look out, the end of the world is coming as the robots take over.
Hey, John.
Gracious.
Hey, John, how do you spell assume? Because this police officer, she would assume it was a drone. How do you spell it? She made an ass, A-double-S, out of me and you.
And you, that's it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
anyway.
it. That's assume.
Yeah. Let's go on. We've got one. Oh, can someone get rid of the puppet?
No, just get rid of the puppet.
Yeah, okay. We've got one last story.
Puppet, not the dummy.
True. Let's have a look at our last story for the day. And this one is an attack drone. Weaponized drones might have a place in the military, but not in civilian life. But what if you've got an itchy trigger finger? How can you get that hillbilly buzz while using a drone? The project might be the answer, the one we're looking at, featuring something a little less lethal. A Nerf gun. The creator of this project on Hackaday found that Nerf battles with kids is an effective way to blow off some steam, but felt that he was getting a bit too much exercise in the process. Instead, he equipped an FPV quadcopter with a 3D printed Nerf gun to take his place. Since manually reloading the Nerf gun after every shot wasn't an option, he needed to create an autoloader. Let's get rid of that music. The darts are propelled by a pair of brushless drone motors mounted side by side with just enough space for a dart to squeeze between them. The motors are allowed to spin up, and then the dart is loaded using a servo-operated plunger out of an off-the-shelf Nerf magazine. My first comment is only in America do we need do we need semi-automatic Nerf guns. Now, he's definitely got some smart kids because they try to avoid it by standing behind him at times.
Drone Wars coming to a theater near you.
Out of the sky. Yeah,
Drone Wars, yeah. Look, I guess, John, and also to Ryan, weaponized drones are unlawful. Do we consider Nerf guns the weaponizing of a drone?
Well, I'm going to jump in first and say if you don't know the difference, then that's what the real problem is. There's the thing about weaponizing a drone,
But there's also something that I remember seeing from CASA a while back about any projectile or something being dropped from a drone above people. For example, our friend Tim French, who had he was dropping a cricket ball from height to get the fastest ball being hit by someone. I think he was actually trying to hit it when it came down, and yeah.
Yeah, look, those sort of things aside, there's a fun part of it. If I had a group of kids doing a STEM class and we were going to build that, it would have all the right outcomes. It's a bit of fun. It's a technological challenge. It's interesting. We're not talking about putting, a semi-automatic rifle on a drone here. We need to be smart enough to know the difference. If we don't know the difference and we don't understand where it's going and what it is, we're diving into a dangerous area.
Did you say we need to be smart enough?
Oh, well, here you go.
Okay. Sorry.
I know what you're saying, but you know what? I got to say, or particularly our viewers here are intelligent enough to know to have a laugh and a look at something, that we could kind of think, yeah, that's a good idea. I saw the Roman candle one, that video. There's some things where that might not go well,
So,
if you hit someone in the eye with it. But everyone's he say, well, that maybe that's where the line is. You don't want to injure someone. The guy picked the soft foam balls because it wouldn't hurt anybody. It was actually a design criteria from the beginning. We don't need to have any more than that, really. What do you think, Ryan?
Well, yeah. So we actually had this in the United States where Austin Hogwarts put a 9mm pistol on his drone and shot it in his yard, and the FAA went after him. He ended up putting on a flamethrower too and cooking a turkey with it. I think it is that same thing that we have to understand. There are areas where we can say there's a clear delineation. A gun you don't want on. A Nerf gun, come on, we're just having some fun. But pyrotechnics, you get into some gray area. A Roman candle, is it really going to hurt somebody? Well, I don't know. A bottle rocket? Probably not, So, how do you develop a law that allows for one thing but not for another? And that's the real challenge that the regulators
maybe
have.
Maybe the line should be, if you can put anything on a drone, but to decide it, you've got to shoot it at yourself first. And if it passes that test, then it's probably okay. I mean, there's one. But to find out where that line is.
Let's hear from Grumpy. Let's get Grumpy up on the screen.
Well, he going back to the thing about the Roman candle, anyways, going back to the Roman candle thing, they can definitely hurt you. Would you shut that music off, Greg?
I can't hear anything but the music. Okay,
I know. Anyways, back years ago, I was doing the whole, with my kids were younger, had the Roman candle, was holding it out like this, and one of them went off kind of squirrely, and it was a 10-shot Roman candle, and that was the second shot. That meant there were 8 more shots left in this thing.
Yeah.
Suddenly, they all went off at the same time, came through my hand, hit my side, broke my ribs, and I carried a mark there, a bruise, as you would say, more or less, for 3 years from that Roman candle. So yeah, they can hurt.
Yeah, they can hurt, can't they? Yeah.
It did. It broke my rib it broke 3 ribs actually down the side, and
would you say,
just
Louis,
from one going off?
Without any, sort of preempting here, would you say that could be put down as experience?
Yeah, it definitely was experience. I never picked up a Roman candle after that either.
Yeah, see, aviation.
We fired them off. They got stuck in the ground, and we stepped back.
Aviation embraces experience. Yeah, you watch other people do. See, I'm going to take that story now, and I'm not going to hold a Roman candle purely because I've learned from your experience. There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
And you've of course learned from your experience being nailed inside a coffin on wheels.
And Ryan, you may not have heard that story. When I was younger, I desperately wanted to be an astronaut. So my brother and I got a tea chest wooden box, and we saved up, got all the money from kids in the street, and attached 53 skyrockets to it and lit them simultaneously, so that I would travel to the moon in 1969, would you believe, to meet Neil Armstrong and return home with him. It was a very well thought out plan, except for the fact that the box rolled off the launch pad and caught fire. But there's some more experience. And ever since then, I've thought about not doing that again. I have. I'm not going to set fire to myself in a wooden box, nailed into a wooden box with a plastic bag over my head and oversized gumboots on. There's just a lot about that can go wrong.
Well, experience is that's the happening. That's the current. Wisdom is what you get out of it, right?
Yeah, right. And wisdom might reach into the point where before you do something stupid, say that might be stupid. And so, yeah, wisdom has a broad application, of using whatever wisdom you've got.
So
John,
how old were you, John, when you learned that?
Yeah. How I was 9 when I did that. Yeah.
Yeah.
9
John,
years
I'm
old,
just
yeah.
wondering, did you actually go and file a flight plan, or you didn't know about them back at the time?
No, but we did establish mission control. We had ground people, sitting at a desk. No computers, of course, but basically they would do the countdown, and we had a checklist. And we did all of that, and we used all of the NASA terminology because we've all been watching a lot of the Apollo, Mercury, and Gemini launches, so we knew the lingo. Fido go, Guido go, and everything else. So we were at 9 years old. We were pretty in tune with it. The power, I mean, you really got to just take away all of that good intent and proper planning and flight planning and say, putting around 2 kilos of gunpowder strapped to you and lighting it while you're nailed in a box is really where, that we should have come up with that, because I got even worse strife for it, because when the box caught fire, my father raced out. You could hear all the commotion, the kids are screaming, and so my father does a quick head count. He can see my brother, he can see 2 of the neighbors' kids and a couple of other kids there. He's doing a head count and he says, I can't see John, but there is a burning box on the lawn, and if I can't see John, there's a good chance that he's in the box, right? So I can remember him dousing the flames and then ripping open the box, getting a hammer and pulling the nail box open. There I was, half suffocating with a plastic bag over my head. And the first thing I said was really where I should have thought, because I opened up, I was inside the box, and while it was tumbling off the launch pad, I thought I was going through the atmosphere, I could smell the smoke and flames, and I thought, I'm on my way to the moon, So when he opened the box, I looked up and said to my father, Dad, what are you doing on the moon? And that's where the trouble started. That's where a real explosion took off, because I can remember not being. You had a Mark Lloyd for 3 years. I wasn't able to sit down for a few days. Let me tell you.
Yeah. I'm just reading here, Joe Blaylock. How many times did the Wright brothers crash? I believe they killed an army general after he made the order, of course. And I'm just thinking, John, maybe there's an explanation for, how this has shaped you in later life. Maybe the nose cone is.
Yeah, maybe that is. That's probably shaped me later. One of my biggest heroes, if you've never read about him, is Bert Hinkler. And of course, he was a famous Australian aviator that flew, the first London-Sydney flight. But Bert, when he was 15, was building gliders up in Bundaberg and trying to fly them. This is using papers written by, in the Wright brothers' time, basically. He was trying to fly gliders in his yard. And I think he was a fantastic, great engineer and a pilot. Unfortunately, he lost his life in Italy and on one of his long record-breaking flights. But if you're really interested in aviation history, Bert Hinkler's read is just fantastic. Equal to the Wright brothers in some ways, I would say, but that may be because I'm Australian.
Could be. Look, a great story,
well,
and it
explains where your hair went.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's where it went, man.
Yeah,
I never grew it back.
Yeah, good story, and good to hear it again. Look, we've had a fun time today, and just as we get to the end of our show, a couple of quick announcements before we do anything. And don't forget about this one. You remember we were going to have a look at these, Grumpy? So we've got this one here from Trevor.
You told me
postcards, is it?
something to say, and I forgot. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you forgot.
Yeah, we invited postcards
I forgot.
from the viewers. That's great.
Postcards from the Outback.
Postcards from Down Under. Maybe that's a new segment we should have.
Postcards from Down Under. Yeah, there we go. Postcards from Down Under.
Oh, John got the reference, but he didn't comment.
No, that's the musical one. I get it. Now I get it.
Oh, he got it.
Postcards from Down Under.
Postcards
we did
from
an album.
Down Under, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There was
not a bad album.
Well, see, he tells me this just at the very last, and I forget.
Well, I didn't want him to hear it because I didn't want him to hear it, but he joined 2 seconds after we mentioned it. But anyway.
There you go. I got there.
So speaking of postcards from down under, if anyone does want to send in a postcard or anything else physical, 5/127 Princess Highway, Sylvania, New South Wales 2224 is where you can send it. If you want to follow us on social media, we're on YouTube, obviously. We're on Twitch, not so much on Twitch anymore, on Facebook. Sorry, we are on Twitch, but we're not on Twitter anymore. They stopped doing video on there. But anyway, there you go. And also, if you want to send in some video to us, upload at gregkuhnert.com and that will reach us. Okay, we've reached the end of the show.
Big show, big show.
It was a big one. It was a good one. It was a fun one. Let's first of all go to our guest for any last words that you may want to share with us for the day.
I will just say thank you for having me on. I'm always excited to come on and talk about drones. It's my favorite thing, and I appreciate that others like that as well.
Okay, definitely. It was good to have you and a lot of useful discussion there. Second of all, Mr. Lloyd, last word from you.
Well, you know what I say, be kind, treat each other better than you would treat yourselves, and even dummies like me matter.
Yeah, there you go.
And Johnny?
Yeah, I just want to say great show and thanks for joining us, everybody. It was great to have Ryan in today. I'd really like to invite him to keep in touch with how he's going with his advocacy, because it's a great subject, and anything that comes on your radar, Ryan, that you want to share, please just jump in, let Greg know, and be great to air it on the show and talk about it again. It was fantastic having you here.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, that's all we got time for. It's been good having everyone here, even Grumpy. So we'll see you next time. Bye-bye for now.
Bye, everybody. Fly safe.